All right. Good evening, everyone. So, the first article for the day is with respect to judicial pendency. Is this a new issue or is this something that you have not heard about before? It's a very familiar issue. When you look at articles like this from the newspaper, how do you read them? Okay. So, I'll give you a small technique about quickly skimming through the articles that you're already aware of. Can you please close the door once? Okay. Whenever you want to see the central point or the argument that an article wants to prove, always look at the end point. Solutions to reduce pendency ought to be considered. So, more or less, this article is trying to tell why do we have judicial pendency, how to solve them. Broadly speaking, this is the structure and the final intent of the article, right? Now, look at this. Unless we give up archaic laws, recruit competent lawyers, we cannot expect the qualitative disposal of cases, nor will pendency reduce. It's like a conclusive statement. I did not even start the article, but I'm looking at the conclusion. The subordinate judiciary should be allowed to function as judges and not be a ministerial court officer ordering the issues of fresh summons, receiving wakalatnama and pleadings. So, the larger picture that we are talking about, the reason why judiciary is not able to clear the pending cases, if you have to put it simply, it's inefficiency. Yes or not? How do we make the system efficient? Okay. This is the central premise of the article. Now, whenever you are preparing for CSAT, even in reading comprehension articles, sometimes you will be running against time. These days, you are getting a lot of questions which are complicated in math, and therefore people will have to take that quick decisions with respect to CSAT, RCs. So, in that situations, a quick way to come to a rough estimate of what this article is about, always look at the conclusion and look at the initial premise. And through those lens, you will be able to come to a conclusion that this is the central premise of the article. In the same way, when someone reads your introduction and your conclusion, they should know what this answer is about. So today's article is not about content, it is about presentation because it's a very clearly structured argument. And since I liked the way it was presented, it's very simple and straightforward, very effective, very clear what the writer wanted to say. And this is exactly how you should articulate your points. Whether you agree with the author or not is secondary. But the point that the author wanted to prove and communicate, put it across the line, it's very clear. Is it clear or not? What is the problem statement that we are dealing with? How to clear pending cases in courts. Now I am trying to search for some data pointer to prove that there are pending cases. What will be that data pointer? Here it is. According to the National Judicial Data Grid, there are 4.69 crore pending cases in district courts. You establish the problem statement. So many pending cases. Okay. Now the second question you need to ask is, why are there so many pending cases? So immediately when the article proceeds to explain, like when the article proceeds, you should look for an explanation. You should find that explanation, right? Let's see if there are few options to make changes to the administration of justice. Okay. First, they're talking about the code of civil procedure. Then they're talking about the roles. Subordinate judges handle this. Then there are wakalatnamas and the procedures therein. So none of this will be important for your exam. They're not going to test the day-to-day administrative aspects of justice. But the problem starts from there. the inefficiencies in the system and how the cases are actually registered and how they are documented, how the quality time is lost in all this paperwork, which can rather be automated through technology. That's where most of the time goes away. That is the first problem. And if you take a look at how the offices operate, a judicial officer in the lowest rank in hierarchy can be appointed in every district court to call all the cases of that particular cadre of courts. This court can do ministerial work the whole day. At the end of the day, this court can list matters for trial courts, and then it will be posted on the website, and the next day the cycle repeats. So most of your time it goes away in filing the cases only, the documenting work. When are you going to listen to them? And when they come to hearing, they're adjourned. So the first problem is how your day-to-day organization of work is conducted and how we normalize this inefficiency in the courts. That's the problem statement number one. It's coming from a practicing lawyer. This article is written by a practicing lawyer who gives you a day-to-day affairs, like a live kind of a live commentary on what happens in most of the courts in India. So that's the problem number one. Subordinate judiciary, its quality. See, when you have such kind of a heading, it's very clear that the quality of the judges and their ability to come up with solid arguments is being questioned. In that argumentation structure, you should see why is this quality questioned? What data pointers or what facts do we have to say that the quality in lower judiciary is bad? Let's see. What is the actual criteria for a lawyer or someone of a judicial officer at lower judiciary? It says that at least 10 years of experience in the bar. Right. Okay, when you have that kind of experience, okay, you expect some level of maturity and proficiency. But sometimes even those procedural aspects are subverted. Judges are appointed without any experience and they find it difficult to cope with the load. So what is the problem? First of all, day-to-day management. Second, you don't have the necessary skills to handle that pressure. Obviously, what will you expect? Now, go forward. Therefore, every civil judge or senior civil judge who is appointed must undergo training with different high court benches for a few months. When a fresher joins a company, what would you do? Train them. How will you train them? You'll ask them to intern with a senior or give them a formal training or a combination of both and then eventually drag them into the projects. But no, that's not how it is done in most state level jobs. Even the recent group 1 and group 2 officers, I've been talking to them. Some of them are my students who are giving the interviews for UPSC. They're mentioning that the training manual of an RDO is the one that is created in 1989 in the undivided state of Andhra Pradesh. And if you are talking about other jobs like MPDO, they don't have a training manual. It's ad hoc. So what kind of proficiency would you expect at state level? That's the problem. When you don't have a systematized procedure, nor do you have a plan, neither plan nor people who are skilled enough, how will you solve this problem? And that's the reason why the cases get pending for large period of time. Then your continuing argument, you also have to see what the courts have to say about it. The Supreme Court, interpreting section 12A of the Commercial Courts Act, held that this provision is mandatory and that the plaintiff is liable to be rejected without pre-suit mediation. Why are we talking about this commercial cases, etc.? See, there are two kinds of cases: civil cases, criminal cases. All the commercial cases, let's say there is a dispute between two individuals, where will they go? They'll have to go to the civil court. But if judgments are delayed like this, do you think they can wait for that? Adjudication is one major aspect of business in India It's a very big pain point. So if you take a look at very big companies, their mediation procedures are not in India. They would prefer to take it elsewhere, maybe Singapore or Dubai, Hong Kong, now Gift City. This arbitration mechanism. Even in that, there is one more pain, that is the Section 12A, which says that you have to ensure that the pre-suit mediation, it's mandatory. You created one more legal hurdle so that the procedure is slowed down. Why do you have to do that? Is the question asked by the writer. Another example is the 6-month cooling off period in marriage laws in filing for consent divorce. So, on one hand, we are talking about the procedural aspects. Why inefficiency is coming up. On a day-to-day level, the way you conduct yourself and do your work, it's inefficient. Then, secondly, you are not having the necessary training to cope with that pressure. Third, we have redundant laws. For example, Section 12 of the Commercial Court Act, or the many states which have a cooling period for divorce. Even when the divorce is mutual, you will have to wait for 6 months. So, creation of this kind of hurdles, of course, it's a different thing. There is a reason why we have that cooling off period in marriage laws, etc. That's a different discussion. But sometimes when the lawyers know that it's not going to work out, and if it's mutual, the writer argues that we should give a provision. We should ensure that the matter is closed there and not drag it further, because it will just pile up. Okay. So even for our procedures, we have laws. Even for the substance, like the spirit of the law, we have laws. Yesterday we were talking about the POSH Act, where the gender relevance, like is POSH Act, sorry, POXO, not POSH Act. Is the POXO gender neutral or not? We have had this General Clauses Act. It's about the procedure. So you create law for another law, sometimes it will slow down the process, but they all exist for a reason. So this is where I disagree with the writer here, even though he's a lawyer. There is a logic of why these laws exist. Many lawyers would say that, it is not necessary, but because of such kind of laws only, yesterday we have seen how we can protect the spirit of the law so that the people who want to subvert the system, distort the system, they get away with it. Clear? So you've had an article where there is a clear-cut conclusion. There is a logical explanation, multifaceted. There are substantiations, case laws, everything. So how do you fix this? First of all, the old procedural laws, they need to be done away with. We need a legislative procedure to fix them. What is this archaic provisions that we're talking about? Archaic means outdated, obsolete. So you have the Code of Civil Procedure, which sometimes, like I mentioned, becomes a tool for litigation. If these are redundant or repetitive, remove them. For example, I agree with the writer when he says that this Section 12, which says that we need a pre-suit mediation. It's not necessary. If they're coming to the commercial court, it indirectly signifies that things are not getting settled with mediation, right? If it is settled at mediation level, they would have gone for mediation only. So it defeats the whole purpose. So remove redundant laws like this and streamline the procedures. That's the suggestion. Now take a look at this. He gives an example here. For example, why should there be 106 rules under so and so order, many of which are hyper technical? Sometimes when you're starting a fresh application, why do you expect that everyone should comply with this kind of technicalities? it makes procedural delay a norm. Why don't you have a step-by-step process? Why not make it applicable only for someone who is at a certain threshold? Why make it universally applicable for everyone? For example, if I have to give you a example, unless and until you clear prelims, mains, and you're appearing in the interview, what will be the purpose of knowing your hobby? Let's say if your hobby is watching movies and you did not clear prelims, but you spent more time filling that form, what's the point? We shouldn't edit our hobbies later. Why do we have to lock it? What if you picked a new hobby? What if your hobby is writing prelims exam again? We can write it, right? So there is a need for a certain logic at every point of time. Like, why have redundant processes again and again is what the author asks. And it's a fair enough question, right? So this is the purpose of the article, and there are many such examples too. Since this is written by a lawyer, you will have multiple such arguments. This is from a legal procedural standpoint. But if you talk about other dimensions, from administration standpoint, who is the largest litigant? State itself. Like 47% of the cases are from the government. Why do you have such high litigation? Why don't we have a litigation policy implemented in its spirit? So when you ask questions like this, when every stakeholder understands the pain points that are created because of their actions, we will have a solution, and everyone should come together to create that solution. And I personally believe that technology has a great role in optimizing the time for this procedural delays. Okay? If ever we get an opportunity, the first place where we have to implement AI is definitely judiciary. Alright, moving forward. India needs to connect, build, and revive with Africa. See, every international relations article will eventually talk about only a few things. But all those things are tied to one important concept. What is that? Power. What gives us power? Partnerships. Partnerships give us power. Alliances give us power. What will force those alliances? Whatever it takes according to that point of time in history. Today it might be AI. Yesterday it was something. Day before something else. So the tool might change, but ultimately what keeps people together is the idea that if we can work together, we will have power. What keeps them away? If we are together, we will lose that power. Simple. As simple as it can get. What are the tools to get that power? You can categorize it into two categories. Hard power, soft power. What is hard power? Military. Something that you can see, touch, feel, something that you can sense. What is soft power? Something that is intangible. It's a sphere of influence, your culture. So, you're talking about military, trade, economy, people movement, migration, pacts, business, all of them will come under hard power. What comes under soft power? Your ability to see the commonalities in people, in cultures, in ideologies, a shared vision. This is what you see in soft power. Ultimately, every international relations question is a play between this hard power and soft power dynamics only. Whether it can be between two people, a group of countries, two countries, or a block of countries, It's always the same. The ideas might change. The tool might change, but the underlying motivation is always the same. And what's that motivation? Power. Clear? Now, applying the same logic, I have already told you these points in different contexts, but I have to remind you time and again to bring you back to apply this thought in day-to-day articles. When we are talking about India and Africa, let's divide the concept of power and the tools that will get us that power into two different categories: hard power, soft power. Now, with this viewpoint, read the article. What is a trade? Do you have any recent investments? Either India invested in Africa or Africa invested in India? Do you have something like that? Look for it. See, 10 years ago, New Delhi hosted the last India-Africa Forum Summit. India and Africa themes, they're important for your prelims exam. So, you need to know when was the last time these meetings were held. In fact, I think it's 2017 or 18. There's a question on India-African forums. So please go back and have a look at that PYQ. After many years, this is again back in news because Africa is a very important partner for us. What happened there? It is basically a summit where all the 54 countries in Africa were hosted by India. It was just at that time where our Prime Minister, NDA government came to power. Our Prime Minister was for the first time connecting with the African continent. So that was the context. But that is not important for exam. What is important? What did we do there? Trade. Trade surpassed ever since 100 billion investments flew into this country. India's support for Africa's global voice has grown. G20 membership, opportunities, like you see, Africa is a growing continent. It's a young population. After India, you have highest growth rates in African countries. India is among the Africa's top 5 investors. We have like investments there. Here, is there anything new or surprising for you to take a note? But if you are a fresher, you end up writing all these facts. Will you really remember whether it is 17 new missions or 25 new missions? Sometimes you might forget and it's not important. The fact is, yes, we have had 100 billion inflow, and this is possible because we opened new offices in various parts of the African continent. More outreach. So, diplomatic outreach has increased, and as a consequence, trade increased. Okay? India is one of the top investors, top 5 investors. And then you will talk about these points which are important from prelim standpoint. What are those points? In April, we have had a conglomeration of India and 9 African countries, navies, who came together for naval exercises. So we are also working on defense. Economy part covered, defense part covered, investments part covered. And then you have something which can be important for prelims exam. Because the keyword, any exercise that is taken up for the first time will become important for UPSC. Have a look here. These 9 navies exercise together in the first Africa-India key maritime engagement. Why? Initiating a security partnership rooted in shared oceanic geography. I'm not explaining this thing slightly because the next time you read articles like this, you need to develop the knack or develop the ability to know what information you should be picking up and the logic behind it. The logic behind it is the concept of power. And I'm telling you and highlighting what all points can be important for prelims and the logic behind it also. Now, there is something called Exim Bank in India. What does it do? Exports Imports Bank. So it will finance, let's say even for some exporting something, you will still need some kind of a support, monetary support. Let's say logistics. If you want to send this goods, let's say a consignment from India to, let's say, Kenya, it would incur some cost. And you will not have the payment initially. Only after the goods reach there and everything is done, the clearance is over, you will get your money back. How will you finance it till then? Through banks like this, Exim. How will you pay for the ship that took your container from port A to port B? So you need not have working capital all the time. You'll have banks like Exim. So it recently extended a 40 million credit for ECOWAS Bank. What is this? Go to the About Us section of that, note down. Because in IR, you will get questions on these lines also. There are previous year questions. That's the reason I'm going line by line here. Africa is a very important theme. Whenever you get questions on Central Asia and Africa, read the editorial, note down the facts. When I say facts, facts like this. Because those two regions, both Central Asia, Africa and Middle East, these three areas are very important. Okay. So then they established education like new campus of IIT Madras in Zanzibar. Then you have the ITEC, Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. This kind of programs you will have with many other people, so it's not that important. The fact that we're also investing in the education aspect of Africans shows that we are moving beyond just transactional trade. How do you know that the relation between two countries is good enough? When you are not just worried about the finances or security part, you're also interested in ensuring they're growing in their life. They're not isolated efforts, but part of a growing web. Now, all of this is fine, but again, you have to see this part. African Continental Free Trade Area. India's UPI and digital stack can complement this transformation. And there are some cities, Kigali, Nairobi, Lagos, which are like the innovation capitals of Africa. So, not only are we investing in their education, especially in the domain of agriculture, in, let's say, for example, Madagascar is known for its pulses. We want to exchange knowledge, technology, so that we build synergies. Tomorrow, if there is a decline in land productivity, the world will be looking at Africa because of its geography, because of its climate. The climate is conducive for enhanced food productivity. And in that kind of an era, India would want to have friends in Africa. All right. So we are looking at not just advanced capital or making money. We are also looking at the basic technology. In fact, if you go to the African continent and see the grassroots level innovations in agriculture, whether it is mechanization of agriculture or utility of drones, utility of fertigation techniques, they are in some pockets much more advanced than our rich states like Punjab. Most of the agri startups are taking off first in Africa and later in India. So even in those areas, we might have some additional advantage in the initial days. So we are looking at the free trade agreement with Africa, and any free trade agreement can be utilized only if we develop the capacities to partner with them, trade with them, and not just be comfortable with the status quo. The problem with most Indian states is that they're very conservative in terms of how they carry out their production patterns. In agriculture, I mean. They're still dependent on MSP. And we can't blame them. And if farmers have to move away from this simple rice paddy wala concept and move to the higher value crops, again we will need support from the government, especially at the district level. And we can't take this kind of decision sitting in Delhi. It's really the local governments that will make the difference. Alright, so here is where another concept called localization of SDGs becomes very important. South Asia and Africa together can change the trajectory of the idea of development. Why? Because of the sheer size of the nations, the population therein. And if we can carry out this hyper localization strategies where you are respecting the local ecology, using that ecology to revamp our economy, this local to global link will be established. This is called glocal. That is one more dimension in India-Africa relations in terms of development. Africa can be seen as a partner for global strategy. Global plus local. You ensure that every local area is getting rich, is getting developed, is ecologically sustainable. Automatically they will all add up and contribute to the global goals. That is the fundamental idea behind the global strategy. Okay. Then the cultural part. What is so important about Africa? If you're an anthropology student, you would have known by now. Humanity is supposedly beginning from Africa. It began in Africa, and the fossils, like let's say for example Turkana man, or there's this place called Olduvai Gorge. You will have fossil remains in that areas, and if you date them back, they're the earliest of the fossils, human fossils. And if you map the trajectory, you will also get to know the migration. So one theory suggests that entire human race that we see, the pigments of DNA that we find in all of us, if you go back and dig them back again and again, you will map them back to Africa. So we would want to know our culture and see how we can get to learn from that culture part. At the end of the day, anthropology, what is it all about? It's about culture. A synchronic and diachronic approach to study the evolution of culture. What do you mean by this? Across time and across space, you will analyze how cultures developed and you'll get to learn from them. That's ultimately the purpose of anthropology. And we will have to develop networks amongst researchers, universities, academicians to facilitate this exchange process. And that's how you will get to know. Of course, the article also talks about cricket. What do you want to look at in the future? First, connect finance to real outcomes. See, the big problem with this kind of articles, most people find them boring because eventually, after some time, you don't see an outcome. It's been 10 years. You see the statistic that so much potential is there, so much investments flew in. But in the public imagination, nothing really changes. But if you take a look at the Ministry of External Affairs data, you will see the tangible change. The number of African students that started flowing into our country. In fact, you'll be surprised to know there are some separate colonies in around Osmania University and also in what is that area? Toli Chowki. You have separate colonies which will be occupied by African students. They stay there. In some areas they get to work So we did engage with Africa. We did transform the trajectory of growth of many pockets of African nations. But that is not translating into tangible outcomes, because it gives a perception that we are not utilizing the money in the best possible fashion. How to do justice to this idea? We need more institutional arrangement, not ad hoc migrants, like not just asking students to come into our country. We need more than that. When public finance is involved, definitely people will ask more tangible outcomes, both the sides. So that's why we need to work on it. We need to de-risk, because in this times of global uncertainty, we will have to be very careful about our outcomes, monetary outcomes. That's where the suggestions come from. Second, build an Africa India digital corridor. It's basically how do we use the digital stack of our 9 pillars of digital India. Wherever possible, we will try to create those synergies. A case to the point being UPI. Many days ago, we were talking about how we have to move away from SWIFT, which is like the intermediary for different countries. Let's say in the context of the ban that Russia had to face in Russia-Ukraine war, they wanted to move away from this intermediary SWIFT. India can provide that alternative through UPI, the fintech revolutionary product. All right. So we can do the same thing for entire Africa. Third, revive the institutional backbone. That is, we did not meet from 2015. It's been a decade, 10 years. So why don't you reconvene, discuss the agenda and strengthen the bonds? That's what the author is suggesting. He is the permanent representative of the United Nations, former. And that's why his suggestions would be extremely important. Okay, that's the reason I picked up this article. You will have nuances, fine details in articles written by people like this, because they've literally walked the talk. They were a part of these discussions. Now that they've retired, they'll contribute through educating people for the next generations. So some articles are very important, so I'll take them a bit slowly. The need for a social audit for SIR 2.0, it's pretty much what we discussed. People don't have the money to support state-driven mechanisms like this. And because of the fact that they don't have money, it should not lead to disenfranchisement. So there is a need to fix that. So the article is about what kind of social audit should we consider. Simply put, what is an audit? Scrutiny of social. What do you mean by social here? The impact that it will have on various sections of the society and how they have the relation and how the interactions go forward. It's about social structures, relations, and how power can get disrupted when you're leading a process, and that process will cause alienation, marginalization. This is the article about. So the rest of the points that we have already discussed is more or less the same, but the concept of social audit in India, is it institutionalized? Do you know any scheme where social audit is mandatory? Manrega. Okay. So read this article of social audit. Okay. So this line, social audits in India are an institutionalized process of participatory democracy by which individuals audit any activity. This would therefore involve the public auditing of the entire cycle of the activity. Long story short, it's a tool to realize the spirit of democracy. If you are disenfranchising people, at least the bare minimum that the state can do is to inform them, make them part of the process. When they're unable to act, then act. Okay, this is the point of social audit. Please read this article. Just that idea is enough. The rest of the things are more or less dealt. SIR we have discussed multiple times. The trajectory of anti-rape laws in India. Do you know the Vishaka guidelines? What did it lead to? So, when you talk about rape laws, this is a pure legal issue. There is this concept of marital rape too. So, if you combine all of these issues and put them under the heading of protection of women, one of the facet is violence against women. Under that, sexual violence becomes one of the facet. GS2, vulnerable sections, gender, women issues, under women issues, violence against women, physical violence, which also includes sexual violence. There, how to fix that? Rape laws. Positioning the article is equally important. You need to know why this article is being discussed. You need to know the logic why we are thinking this article is important. Okay. So this article can be combined with a separate issue, which entire women issues I'll take at once. This issue is pending in the month of December along with the science and tech classes. When we are moving to the prelims phase, we will discuss this issue also together as a cluster. Clear? I just wanted to bring this to your notice so that you store this article. And if you think you don't want to wait till then, go to the Telegram channel, search for CEDAW, CEDAW. Okay? You will find a couple of articles. There is one umbrella article. Okay? Under that, you will see violence against women. Under that, you will see this issue of rape laws. It's already discussed there. You can read that. But I'll explain in detail when I deal with every other, because time is running out. Okay? Batukeshwar Dutt. Who is Batukeshwar Dutt? If you see this topic of revolutionary activists, I wouldn't prefer to call them terrorists, but I would call them revolutionary activists of our Indian national movement. One of the person, Batukeshwar Dutt. So some facts about this person are given here. You can see that he was convicted in the Delhi Assembly bomb case on June 12th, 1929. So some details about this person are given here. Please go through this. I'll also post this article on my history channel. I'll post it later. I was not having time. I'll post it tonight or maybe tomorrow. You can go through that. Next comes this quick last page. Yeah, this one. UNESCO new guidelines on the use of neurotechnology. What do you mean by neurotechnology? Something that has got to do with brain? Entire, because what joins all of them together ultimately? How your mind commands all of this will be the central point of discussion. See, the reason why we are talking about this kind of technology is because the pace with which technology is developing and the pace with which ethical arguments surrounding this technology are developing is uneven. Technology is much quicker, and most of the technologies are first misused before we figure out the use case. Imagine the kind of impact AI can have, and what did we do with it? the first thing that came out was deepfake, scams, financial frauds. Because what stops people from misusing technology is morality. Morality requires effort. Misuse doesn't. Therefore, there is a necessity for us to come up with ethical guidelines on any technology. Clear? So, we are talking about the guidelines that is coming up from UNESCO. Why do you think UNESCO is coming up with this? UNESCO has got something to do with children, right? Or is it UNICEF? Somebody came up to me and asked, why is UNESCO coming up with these guidelines today? I asked him, who else will come up with this? UNICEF. So it's always important to remember the full forms, the objective of every organization. Go back to the basics, about us section, right? UNESCO issued the first global normative framework on the ethics of neurotechnology. This article, where will it go? GS4 ethics. We are not talking about the technology. We are talking about the ethics that will guide the use of this technology. GS4 applied ethics, ethics in international relations, biotechnology, or in general technology. Because this is a global framework. And therefore it becomes a international ethics issue too. And we want all the countries to adapt this. Why all the countries? Why not just one country? Because these principles are universal. If you're talking about the laws of physics, it's not going to change in India and Africa. It's going to be the same. I mean, you might argue that the gravitational pull in Africa at the equator might be slightly different than at the poles, but more or less, we are too insignificant to notice that change. Ethics is not for planetary boundaries, it's for human beings. So for that practical reason, we need a global level framework. What will a global level framework say? Things you should do, things you should not do. And this is what the article is trying to say. First thing, you need to define the scope of the technology. And that's what we're doing here. It refers to the devices and the procedures that access, assess, and act on the neural system, including the brain. So, what is the biggest implication of this? There is something which we place on our mind. Some technocrat is trying to do something. Are you aware of that? What is that? Neuralink. What is Neuralink? It's a brain-computer interface which tries to interact with your mind without sometimes your consent. It might be possible. That is what neurotechnology is all about. And why do you think we need ethical guidelines? Imagine someone dictating what you should be doing without you realizing. Sounds like a very good science fiction story, but equally scary too. For that reason, with advances in research and investments in projects like the US Brain Initiative and Elon Musk's Neuralink, it is important. Okay. Again, it talks about, the rest of the article talks about the market that this technology has, which is not really that important for us. But next up is the set of issues that this technology is going to bring up. When we are dealing with any technology and any guidelines, we'll have a set of restrictions, a set of rights that you're not supposed to violate. So what will constitute that rights? Neuro rights. I'm asking you, is mental privacy a fundamental right now in this context? Why? Why is it so important to have mental privacy? Why are you laughing? What is mental privacy, first of all? See, at this moment, you might be wondering if your brain is like, what is all this nonsense? I wish I just have access to UPSC paper. I can just clear this exam. And Neuralink is actually reading it out. It's actually showing on the screen whatever your thoughts are. I know it's not possible, but I get to read all those thoughts. And the student is listening to me with intent, like he's nodding his head. But that is what is going on in his mind. This is the first important area where you need to have mental privacy. Sounds like a very fascinating, scary story, but new syllabus is added with technology. When we were starting our preparation in 2000 decade ago, just after college is over, we did not know Puttaswamy judgment. Right to privacy, should it be a fundamental right? We were debating. We're talking about mental privacy 10 years later. We did not understand the concept of privacy even after judgment came. How is it a fundamental right? Not until we realize the examples of how dangerous it can be if we don't have that fundamental right, we do not understand. So the legal issues that these technologies will come up with and the kind of impact it will have on the lives of people, sometimes funny, sometimes scary, but at the heart of all of it is going to disrupt the way we are going to live. And for that practical reason, ethics are important. Right? So it's not the technology per se, it's what we do with it. So here, if these kind of thoughts can pop up on the screen, more often than not, the rich are much more scared than the poor. And for that practical reason, you will see any kind of ethics coming from OECD countries first, EU first. Because they will have much larger consequences on the society than a poor person's private thought. Okay? So this is why way back in 2019, even before ChatGPT came, OECD was the first international standard setting organization on responsible innovation in neurotechnology enterprises, responsible development, responsible use, and technology transfer. This is a very, very important theme for prelims also. What is neurotechnology? What are the various kinds of neurotechnology? What is BCI? Brain-computer interface. How does it work? How does it impact brain? What are the organizations that came up with this? UNESCO guidelines. All of this will partly become a segment in the so-called frontier technologies. The new technologies that are going to disrupt how we are going to conduct our life going forward. Things like AI, IoT, Web 3.0, immunology, precision medicine, 3D printing, 4D printing. Things that sound like science fiction a couple of years ago, which also included ChatGPT. Today it's a reality. So the pace of technological development is outpacing the ethical development of human beings. That's why articles like this will become more important. Usually this will be forgotten, but you need to know to which umbrella article and umbrella syllabus pointer you need to tag it with, so that you don't see these issues in silos. Okay? So the rest of the issues, they are too technical at this point of time for you to remember. Maybe once the issue comes into application, you will get to know how to use this. Right now, even if you remember and by heart, you will zone out and forget everything. So store this article. When the time comes, we will come back to this again. I'll be posting about this article too in our channel. Read the associated links in the Telegram channel too. Okay? That's it for the day. Thank you.